I'm Emma Mitchell, 32, and every morning I sip my coffee on my front porch, watching my parents' curtains twitch across the street. 14 years ago, Dad delivered his ultimatum. If you don't like our rules, there's the door. They wanted my bedroom for a home office. Now I own a restored Victorian directly facing their modest ranch, and I can't help but smile when they peek through windows as I park my Mercedes in the circular driveway. They say success is the best revenge, but having them witness it daily makes it even sweeter. If you've ever experienced family betrayal or watched someone choose favorites among their children, you know exactly how I felt. I'd love to hear where you're watching from today. Drop a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe if you want more stories about family karma and how sometimes the best response to being pushed away is building something beautiful right where they can see it. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, I was an only child for 13 years. My parents, Linda and Robert Mitchell, gave me their complete attention. Dad worked as a mid-level manager at an insurance company, and Mom taught fourth grade at the local elementary school. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable in our three-bedroom ranch house on Maple Street. My childhood bedroom walls were painted lavender, my choice, when I turned 10, and covered with academic certificates, swim team ribbons, and posters of bands my parents barely tolerated. Everything changed when I was 13, and Mom unexpectedly got pregnant with twins. Ryan and Tyler arrived in a flurry of blue balloons and twice as many diapers as planned. Suddenly, I went from being the center of my parents' universe to practically invisible. The first few months, I understood. Twins require constant attention, especially when you're older parents who thought your family was complete. I stepped up, helping with midnight bottles and diaper changes, proud to be a big sister. But as months turned to years, the shift in family dynamics became permanent. My parents' focus remained locked on the twins, even after the infant chaos subsided. What started as "Emma, you're so independent and mature," became their justification for neglecting my needs while catering to my brothers. When I turned 16 and received my driver's license, I was thrilled until I realized the only car I'd be driving was the one I bought myself. Meanwhile, my parents started a separate savings account for the twins' future vehicles. Boys need reliable transportation, Dad explained when I questioned the disparity. Besides, you've always been so responsible with money. The college fund my grandparents had established for me when I was born mysteriously shrank during my junior year of high school. When I found statements showing large withdrawals, Mom finally admitted they'd borrowed from it to pay for the twins' private school tuition. "You'll get scholarships, Emma. You're so smart," she said, patting my hand. The boys struggle more academically. They need the extra support. Despite maintaining a 4 gigapascals, playing varsity volleyball, and working 15 hours weekly at the local library, I was repeatedly told that I wasn't trying hard enough when I expressed any need for attention or support. Meanwhile, Tyler and Ryan received praise for C+ grades and participation trophies. The Christmas when I was 17 painfully illustrated where I stood in the family hierarchy. The twins, then 4, received new gaming systems, expensive clothes, and dozens of toys that overflowed from under the tree. My gifts consisted of practical items, notebooks, a gas station gift card, and socks. When I opened the final small box containing a simple silver necklace, Mom said, "We know it's not much, but you understand our budget is tight with the boys' school tuition." My grandmother Martha was the only family member who recognized what was happening. During her monthly visits, she would slip me money and whisper encouragement. "Your day will come, Emma. Keep your eyes on your future." She lived 4 hours away in Vermont, making her support limited but precious. Each summer, I spent 2 weeks at her lakeside cottage, the only time I felt truly seen and valued. I graduated high school as valedictorian, earning a partial scholarship to Northeastern University in Boston. My parents attended the ceremony, but left immediately after my speech to attend the twins' t-ball game. The photographs from that day show me holding my diploma alone while other students celebrated with their families. My grandmother Martha took me out for dinner afterward, her eyes brimming with both pride and sadness. "They don't understand what they have in you," she said over dessert. "Someday they will, and by then it might be too late." Working through high school had given me enough savings for my first semester's books and supplies, but I knew staying at home during college would be necessary to make ends meet. The commute would be challenging but manageable. I had hoped my academic success would finally earn my parents' recognition, but even this milestone became another opportunity to remind me of my supposed self-sufficiency. "You see, Emma," Dad said on the drive home from graduation, "we knew you'd be fine on your own. The boys need more guidance." By the time I started college, I had accepted my place as the forgotten child. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly that role would transform from emotional neglect to complete abandonment. I had just finished my first semester at Northeastern with a perfect 4 gigapascals. Despite taking a full course load, I was working 2 jobs, weekend shifts at a coffee shop near campus and evenings at the university library to cover the portion of tuition my scholarship didn't. Living at home was the only way I could afford to attend college without drowning in debt. The drive from our Connecticut home to Boston was exhausting, especially during winter, but I made it work. I scheduled my classes for 3 days a week, stayed with a friend near campus on late nights, and spent the remaining time at home studying or working. My bedroom had become my sanctuary, the one place where I could focus without the constant chaos the twins created. One Friday evening in December, I arrived home after finals week, exhausted but proud of completing my first semester successfully. I was looking forward to a rare quiet weekend before starting my holiday work schedule. As I walked through the door, I noticed my parents sitting at the dining table, an unusual formality that immediately put me on edge. "Emma, we need to talk," Dad said, gesturing to the empty chair across from them. His tone was businesslike, the same one he used when discussing household budgets or car repairs. Mom smiled nervously as I sat down. "We've been thinking about making some changes around here." "What kind of changes?" I asked, noticing how they exchanged glances. "Well," Dad continued, clearing his throat, "now that you're in college and mostly gone during the week, we think it makes sense to repurpose your bedroom." The words hung in the air as I processed what he was saying. "Repurpose how?" "I'm starting to do more work from home," Dad explained. "The company is cutting back on office space, and I need a dedicated office. Your room has the best light and enough space for my desk and filing cabinets. Plus," Mom added with forced brightness, "the boys are getting bigger and need more space for their things. We thought we could use part of your room for storage." I sat stunned, trying to formulate a response that wouldn't sound selfish or ungrateful. "But where will I stay when I'm home? I still live here most of the week." Dad shrugged. "You can use the pull-out sofa in the basement. It's only temporary until you get your own place after graduation." 3 years is temporary? My voice cracked slightly. "What about holidays and summers? All my things are in that room." "You can keep some essentials in storage bins under the sofa," Mom suggested. "And honestly, Emma, you're hardly ever here anymore. You're always studying or working." The irony wasn't lost on me. For years they had praised my independence and self-sufficiency when it meant they could focus on the twins. Now they were using those same traits to justify taking away the only space I had left in the family home. "We were thinking of starting the conversion over Christmas break," Dad continued, oblivious to my distress. "The sooner we get my office set up, the better." "Christmas is in 2 weeks, I protested. "Where am I supposed to go during break?" "You can still use the basement," Mom said, "or maybe stay with one of your friends." "Didn't you mention that Ashley invited you to her family's cabin?" Ashley had indeed invited me, but only for New Year's weekend, not the entire 3-week break. The casual way they suggested I find somewhere else to stay during a family holiday was the final confirmation of my status as an outsider. "So you're kicking me out," I said flatly. It wasn't a question. "Don't be dramatic, Emma," Dad sighed. "We're just making practical use of the space. This is our house, and these are our decisions to make." Something inside me snapped. After years of accepting less, doing more, and never complaining, I finally found my voice. I work 2 jobs while maintaining a full scholarship. I commute 3 hours each way to save money. I've never asked for anything except to keep my bedroom in the house where I still live. How is that dramatic? Watch your tone, Dad warned. This conversation is a courtesy, not a negotiation. A courtesy? I laughed incredulously. You're telling me 2 weeks before Christmas that you're converting my bedroom into an office and storage space, and I'm supposed to be grateful for the notice? Emma, please understand, Mom interjected. The boys need, the boys need, the boys want. The boys, I interrupted, tears threatening. When has anything I needed ever mattered in this house? Dad's face hardened. That's enough. This is our house, our rules. If you don't like it, there's the door. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. I looked at Mom, hoping she would intervene, but she simply stared at her hands folded on the table. Her silence was a betrayal more painful than Dad's words. Later that night, I overheard them talking in the kitchen while I sat frozen on my bed, surrounded by the life I had built in this room. Do you think we were too harsh? Mom asked. She needs to understand reality, Dad replied. Emma has always been so independent. She'll be fine. The boys need us more right now. The familiar refrain, Emma will be fine, the boys need more, had been the soundtrack of my adolescence. Only now it was being used to justify pushing me out completely. That weekend, I packed as many of my belongings as would fit in my old Honda Civic. I worked extra shifts, called friends for temporary couch space, and contacted the university about emergency housing options. My grandmother Martha was horrified when I called her, offering the small amount she could afford to help me find an apartment. This isn't right, Emma, she said, her voice shaking with anger. A parent doesn't stop being a parent when things get inconvenient. On the day I moved out, my parents were taking the twins to a holiday light display. They left a note reminding me to leave my house key and garage door opener on the kitchen counter. As I carried the last box to my car, I looked back at the house where I had grown up, but never truly belonged. I made a silent promise to myself that someday I would create a home where I was never an afterthought. I spent that night sleeping in my car in a Walmart parking lot, before a classmate's family offered their guest room until January. It was the first of many temporary arrangements that would define the next phase of my life. The first year on my own tested every limit I thought I had. January in Boston brought record-breaking snowfall, and I navigated it all while balancing a full course load and increased work hours. The university's emergency housing had placed me in a dormitory triple with 2 sophomores who resented having a freshman roommate mid-year. I slept with earplugs to block their whispered complaints and kept my belongings in neatly labeled containers that slid under my bed. By February, I found a room in an apartment with 4 other students in Somerville. The commute to campus was longer, but the rent was cheaper. My bedroom was barely larger than a closet, a converted pantry with just enough space for a twin mattress and a small desk, but it was mine. No one could repurpose it or tell me I didn't deserve the space. I picked up a 3rd job washing dishes at a diner on weekend nights, often finishing my shifts at 2 a.m. before catching 3 hours of sleep and heading to morning classes. Despite the exhaustion, I maintained my GPA and even made the dean's list that spring. Contact with my parents became sporadic and strained. Mom would occasionally text to ask how I was doing, but conversations inevitably circled back to the twins' latest achievements. When I did visit, usually for obligatory holidays, the basement pull-out sofa awaited me. My former bedroom had indeed become Dad's home office, with the closet and underbed space filled with the twins' outgrown clothes and sports equipment. During one Easter dinner, when I was nearing the end of my freshman year, Mom asked how my apartment situation was working out. "It's fine," I replied, not mentioning the black mold in the bathroom or the way the pantry bedroom turned into a sauna during warm weather. "I'm managing." "See, Robert?" Mom said to Dad. "I told you Emma would figure things out. She's always been so resourceful." Dad nodded approvingly. "That independent streak serves you well. Not like the boys they'd be lost on their own at your age. The twins, now 6, were currently squabbling over who got the last dinner roll. Mom quickly intervened, cutting it precisely in half to prevent a meltdown. The contrast between their careful attention to the twins' needs and their casual dismissal of my struggles wasn't lost on me. That summer, I couldn't afford to return to Connecticut, so I stayed in Boston, picking up extra shifts and subletting a slightly better room when campus housing emptied. I sent grandmother Martha bus fare so she could visit for a weekend, showing her around the city with forced enthusiasm. "You're too thin," she observed over dinner at a cheap Italian restaurant I'd splurged on for her visit. "Are you eating enough?" "College diet," I joked, not mentioning how I often skipped meals to make rent. "I'm fine, really." Martha reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "You shouldn't have to be this kind of fine at 19, Emma. What your parents did wasn't right." Her validation meant everything, but I was determined not to become bitter. "It taught me self-reliance," I said, echoing the justification I'd repeated to myself on the hardest days. "There's a difference between teaching independence and abandonment," Martha replied firmly. "Don't let them rewrite this story." In my sophomore year, I took an introduction to finance elective to fulfill a general education requirement and discovered an unexpected talent and passion. Numbers had always come easily to me, but seeing how they could be leveraged to build wealth and security captivated my attention in a way no other subject had. Professor Diana Wilson noticed my aptitude and began inviting me to stay after class for additional discussions. Unlike my parents, she saw potential in me that deserved nurturing. "You have a natural instinct for this," she told me one afternoon as we reviewed investment strategies. "Have you considered finance as your major?" I hadn't. My plan had been nursing practical, reliable, with guaranteed employment. But the more I learned about finance, the more I saw it as a path not just to stability, but to the kind of security that meant never having to depend on anyone else again. "I'm afraid of making the wrong choice," I admitted to Professor Wilson. "If I fail, there's no safety net for me." She regarded me thoughtfully. "Sometimes the absence of a safety net forces us to build wings. And from what I've seen, Emma, you're already soaring." With her encouragement, I changed my major and applied for a competitive internship at Morton Financial, a boutique investment firm in downtown Boston. When I was selected from hundreds of applicants, Professor Wilson wasn't surprised. "They recognized what I saw immediately," she said. "Raw talent combined with unmatched work ethic. That's rarer than you might think." The internship led to a part-time position during my junior and senior years. For the first time, I earned enough to quit my other jobs, focus on my studies, and even save a small amount each month. I moved into a better apartment with only 2 roommates and occasionally treated myself to coffee that wasn't from the campus dining hall. During this time, my relationship with my parents remained distant. They reached out primarily when they needed something advice on a student loan for the twins' future college expenses or help setting up new phones. I maintained cordial contact without opening myself up to further hurt. When grandmother Martha's health began declining in my senior year, I made weekly bus trips to Vermont to visit her. My parents rarely made the journey, citing the twins' busy schedule of soccer games and birthday parties. "They don't see what they've lost," Martha told me during one visit, her once strong voice now fragile. "But I want you to promise me something, Emma. Don't let their failure shape your future. Build something beautiful with your life, not out of spite, but because you deserve it." I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in finance and a minor in economics. The day I accepted my diploma, I looked out at the audience and saw Professor Wilson cheering. My parents had sent a congratulatory text that morning, explaining they couldn't attend because the twins had a swim meet. I told myself it didn't matter, but the empty seats reserved under my name told a different story. That evening, as my classmates celebrated with their families, I sat alone in my apartment and made a promise to myself. I would build not just a career, but a life so full and successful that its absence would be felt by those who had chosen to miss it. not for revenge, but for vindication of the potential they had failed to nurture. By 25, I had transformed from a struggling student to a rising star at Morton Financial. My internship had evolved into a full-time position upon graduation, and I quickly distinguished myself by developing innovative portfolio strategies that attracted several high-net-worth clients to the firm. Unlike some of my colleagues who came from privileged backgrounds with built-in networks, I approached each day with the hunger of someone who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. I arrived first, left last, and spent weekends analyzing market trends while others attended brunches and beach outings. This wasn't just a job to me, it was my path to the security I'd never had. Senior partners began requesting me for their client teams, impressed by both my technical knowledge and my ability to explain complex concepts in accessible terms. One particularly successful quarter, after bringing in 3 major new accounts, I received a substantial bonus that equaled nearly half my annual salary. That night, alone in my small but now solo apartment, I stared at the deposit notification on my phone screen and felt tears stream down my face. For the first time since leaving home, I had a financial cushion. The constant knot of anxiety in my stomach, the fear of one emergency wiping out everything loosened slightly. Instead of spending the bonus on luxuries or even modest upgrades to my living situation, I followed the principles I advised clients on daily. I established an emergency fund, paid off my remaining student loans, and invested the rest in a carefully diversified portfolio. Alongside my day job, I began developing financial literacy workshops, specifically designed for young women from disadvantaged backgrounds. The free monthly sessions at a local community center allowed me to share the knowledge that had changed my trajectory. Watching participants grasp concepts that could alter their financial futures brought a fulfillment that even my professional success couldn't match. "You understand these women in a way many financial advisors never could," said Jessica Bradford, the community center director, after observing one of my workshops. "You speak their language because you've lived their reality." Her words reminded me that my struggles, while painful, had given me valuable perspective that many of my colleagues lacked. The empathy born from hardship had become one of my greatest professional assets. This period of growing stability was interrupted by an unexpected call from my mother. It had been months since we'd spoken beyond perfunctory text messages on birthdays and holidays. "Emma?" Her voice sounded strained. "We need to talk about something important." My stomach tightened instinctively. "What's going on?" "It's about the boys' college plans," she explained. "They're juniors now, and we've been looking at schools. The problem is, their college fund isn't nearly enough. Your father and I were hoping you might be able to help." The irony wasn't lost on me. The same college fund that had been borrowed from to fund the twins' private school education was now insufficient for their university expenses. And they were turning to me, the child they'd deemed so self-sufficient that she could be sent away for financial rescue. "I'm not in a position to help right now," I replied carefully, controlling the tremor in my voice. "But I'd be happy to talk with Ryan and Tyler about scholarship applications and financial aid options. Those resources made my education possible." The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. They didn't want my knowledge, they wanted my money. "Emma, this is family," Mom finally said, her tone shifting to one of disappointed accusation. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you respond when we need help?" The audacity nearly took my breath away. "Everything you've done for me?" I repeated slowly. "Like what exactly?" "We raised you, provided a home, food, education, until you decided I was inconvenient," I interrupted. "Mom, I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college after you and Dad told me to leave. I slept in my car before finding emergency housing. I haven't forgotten. That was years ago, and you're clearly doing well now. The boys don't have your advantages." I nearly laughed at the twisted logic. "My advantages came from necessity, not privilege." "I'm sorry, but I can't help financially. The offer to guide them through the financial aid process stands." After that conversation, communication with my parents became even more infrequent. Through occasional social media updates, I learned that Ryan and Tyler had been accepted to state universities with partial athletic scholarships. I sent congratulatory cards but received no acknowledgement. If you've ever been pushed away by family only to have them return when you have something they need, you know exactly how complicated these feelings can be. I'd love to hear if you've experienced something similar. Drop a comment below, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next part of this story. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success, it's having the strength to maintain boundaries with the people who didn't value you when you needed them most. When grandmother Martha passed away shortly after I turned 27, I received a call from a lawyer rather than from my parents. She had left me her modest savings and a letter expressing her pride in the woman I had become. The inheritance wasn't life-changing in terms of amount, but it represented the one family relationship that had consistently affirmed my worth. I invested the money carefully, applying the same principles that had guided my personal portfolio's growth. Over time, this seed money would become instrumental in ways I couldn't yet imagine. By 28, I had been promoted to senior investment advisor at Morton Financial and developed a reputation in Boston's financial community as someone to watch. At an industry networking event, I met Sophia Parker, a successful real estate developer known for transforming neglected properties into thriving community spaces. "Your workshop series for low-income women is impressive," she said after introducing herself. Financial literacy presented as an accessible tool rather than mysterious knowledge reserved for the elite. That approach resonates with my philosophy about real estate. Our conversation evolved into regular coffee meetings where we discussed everything from market trends to the practical applications of wealth building for those traditionally excluded from financial systems. Sophia, 15 years my senior, became both mentor and friend, someone who saw my potential, not as something to exploit, but to nurture. "I'm putting together an investment group for a new project," she mentioned one afternoon. "It's a historic building in Cambridge, beautiful bones, but needs significant restoration. The minimum buy-in is substantial, but the projected returns are exceptional. Would you be interested in reviewing the prospectus?" The minimum investment amount would require nearly everything I had saved, including Martha's inheritance. It was a risk that contradicted the conservative approach I typically advised clients to follow. Yet something about the opportunity and Sophia's track record gave me the courage to consider it. After thorough due diligence, including hiring an independent assessor to evaluate the property, I decided to invest. The restoration project proceeded faster than projected, and when the renovated luxury apartments sold within weeks of listing, my return was nearly triple my initial investment. This success gave me the confidence and capital to participate in additional ventures with Sophia's team. Each project built not just my portfolio, but my understanding of real estate as a vehicle for wealth creation. While I maintained my position at Morton Financial, I began looking for opportunities to combine my financial expertise with this new passion for property development. My lifestyle remained relatively modest despite my growing net worth. I upgraded to a nicer apartment in a safer neighborhood and replaced my decade-old Honda with a reliable Audi, but otherwise continued living below my means. The financial security I was building wasn't about immediate gratification, but creating a future where I would never again be vulnerable to anyone's whims. When I turned 29, I received a notification from a real estate app I had set up to monitor properties in my hometown. A Victorian house on Elmwood Avenue, directly across from my parents' home, had just been listed for sale. The coincidence was so striking that I initially thought it must be an error. I clicked through the listing photos, revealing a once grand house that had fallen into disrepair. The bones were good, but years of neglect had left it needing comprehensive renovation. Most potential buyers would see only the extensive work required, but thanks to my experience with Sophia's projects, I saw opportunity. As I stared at the property's street view, showing my parents' house visible just across the intersection, a plan began to form. one that would test whether I had truly moved beyond the hurt of the past or was still defined by it. The morning after discovering the listing, I stood on the sidewalk across from 47 Elmwood Avenue, looking between the Victorian and my parents' ranch-style home. The juxtaposition was striking. The Victorian towered 3 stories high with ornate woodwork and a wraparound porch, while my childhood home squatted low and practical, its aluminum siding weathered to a dull beige. I had driven 3 hours from Boston on impulse, needing to see the property in person before I could decide if my initial reaction had been rational or purely emotional. As I stood there, a memory surfaced of 13-year-old me walking home from school, staring up at this very house and imagining what it would be like to live somewhere so grand. Back then, it had belonged to the Hendersons, an elderly couple who maintained it meticulously. After their passing, their children had rented it out for years before finally listing it for sale. "Are you here for the open house?" a realtor approached, interrupting my thoughts. Her name badge identified her as Brenda Watson from Connecticut Valley Realty. "Is there an open house today?" I hadn't seen that in the listing. "Starts in about 20 minutes. I'm just setting up. Are you interested in historical properties?" I glanced back at my parents' house, where the living room curtain twitched slightly. Someone was watching. "Very interested," I replied, "in this property specifically." Inside, the house's neglect was more apparent. Water damage stained the ceilings, hardwood floors were scratched beyond recognition, and the kitchen hadn't been updated since the 1972nd. Yet the original features remained intact: crown molding, a grand staircase, stained glass transoms, and 5 fireplaces, each with unique Victorian tilework. "It's a complete renovation project," Brenda acknowledged, as we toured the 3rd floor. "The last tenants weren't exactly careful, and the owners couldn't maintain it properly from out of state." "What's the foundation like?" I asked, thinking of Sophia's first rule of property investment. "You can fix anything but a bad foundation without breaking the bank." "Surprisingly solid. The inspection report shows no major structural issues. It's mostly cosmetic and systems updates: electrical, plumbing, HVAC." I nodded, mentally calculating costs based on similar projects I'd observed. The asking price, while not insignificant, was well below what the house could be worth after proper restoration. The location in a historic district meant property values were stable, and zoning laws protected the neighborhood's character. "I'd like to make an offer," I said, surprising both Brenda and myself with the decisiveness. "Don't you want to think about it? Consult a contractor?" Her concern was professional, but I could see dollar signs in her eyes at the prospect of a quick sale. "I've been involved with several similar renovations in Boston," I explained, "and I grew up right across the street. I know this neighborhood intimately." Walking back to my car after arranging to submit a formal offer the next day, I paused to look again at my parents' house. This time, I could clearly see Mom standing in the window, watching me with unconcealed curiosity. I waved briefly before driving away, leaving her to wonder who the well-dressed woman touring the neighborhood eyesore might be. Back in Boston, I scheduled an emergency session with Dr. Miranda Patel, the therapist I'd been seeing for the past 2 years. Her office had become a sanctuary where I could examine the complex emotions surrounding my family without judgment. "I'm thinking of buying a house across from my parents," I announced, after settling into the familiar armchair. Dr. Patel's expression remained neutral, though her eyebrows rose slightly. "That's a significant decision. What's motivating it?" I spent the hour exploring the tangled web of feelings the potential purchase evoked. Was it a power move designed to force my parents to witness my success? A subconscious desire to remain connected to a family that had pushed me away? Or simply a good investment opportunity that happened to come with emotional baggage? "It could be all of those things," Dr. Patel suggested. "The question is whether purchasing this house would contribute to your healing or keep you tethered to past hurts." I left without a clear answer, but with a better understanding of what I needed to consider beyond the financial aspects. That evening, I called Sophia to get her professional opinion on the property and my renovation estimates. The numbers look solid, she concluded after reviewing the details I'd sent. But Emma, are you prepared for what this means? Living across from your parents isn't just a financial investment, it's an emotional one. I know, I admitted. Part of me worries it's petty or unhealthy. Or, Sophia countered, it could be reclaiming something, taking control of a narrative that was written for you, against your will. She paused. Just be clear about your intentions. Restoration should be about creating something beautiful, not settling scores. Her words resonated deeply. I had spent years building a life defined by forward momentum, rather than backward glances. This house could either become an anchor to past hurts or a testament to how far I'd come. My offer was accepted 3 days later. I arranged for a local contractor to begin preliminary work while I finalized plans to transfer to Morton Financial's Hartford office, just 30 minutes from my hometown. The timing aligned perfectly with a management restructuring that had left the Connecticut branch understaffed. I decided to keep my identity as the buyer private for as long as possible. The purchase was made through a limited liability company I established for real estate investments, with all communication going through my attorney. This wasn't about creating a dramatic reveal. I simply needed space to approach the project on my terms, without the complications of family dynamics. The renovation began in earnest that spring. I rented a small apartment in Hartford while overseeing the transformation of 47 Elmwood Avenue. Every decision, from restoring the original hardwood floors to selecting historically appropriate paint colors, felt like an affirmation of the life I had built through my own efforts. Neighbors naturally noticed the activity at the long-neglected property. Several stopped by to express appreciation for the restoration work. My parents, however, maintained their distance, watching from across the street as trucks delivered materials and workers transformed the exterior. If they recognized me during my weekend visits to check on progress, they gave no indication. By summer, the house's facade had been restored to its original glory, with freshly painted gingerbread trim and a wraparound porch rebuilt to exact historical specifications. The contrast between the Victorian's emerging beauty and my parents' fading ranch became more pronounced with each passing week. I threw myself into every aspect of the renovation, researching period-appropriate fixtures, sourcing reclaimed materials for authenticity, and working alongside the craftsmen restoring the ornate ceiling medallions. Each detail represented not just an investment in property, but in creating something that reflected my values and aesthetic. The master suite took shape on the second floor, with a reading nook positioned at the bay window, offering a clear view of my childhood home. This wasn't by accident. I wanted that visual reminder not as a source of bitterness, but as acknowledgement of the journey that had brought me here. In the third-floor turret, I created a home office with a 360-degree view of the neighborhood where I had grown up feeling invisible. The irony wasn't lost on me that my father had converted my bedroom to an office, and now I would have a grander one with a perspective he could never match. As summer turned to fall, interior work progressed from structural repairs to finishing details. I selected furnishings that balanced Victorian character with modern comfort, nothing ostentatious but undeniably elegant. The kitchen, while updated with high-end appliances, maintained period charm with custom cabinetry modeled after original designs. Throughout the process, I maintained professional distance from my parents, who still had no confirmation I was behind the transformation happening across from their home. This boundary wasn't about avoidance but self-protection. I needed to complete this project as an expression of my own vision rather than a reaction to their presence. In late October, as painters applied the final touches to the intricate exterior trim, I stood on the sidewalk admiring the transformation. The once neglected Victorian had been reborn as the neighborhood's crown jewel. As I made notes on my tablet, an unmistakable voice broke my concentration. "Excuse me," my father called, crossing the street toward me. "Are you the contractor? We've been wondering who purchased the property." I turned slowly, watching recognition dawn on his face. In the 7 years since we'd last seen each other, I had changed from a stressed college student to a confident professional woman. His expression shifted from polite inquiry to shocked disbelief. "Emma," he managed finally, "is that you?" "Hello, Dad," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice remained. "Yes, I'm the owner. The renovation should be complete in about 3 weeks." He stared at me, then at the house, struggling to reconcile the daughter he had dismissed with the woman who now owned the most impressive property on the street. "You bought this?" he repeated, gesturing toward the Victorian. "How? When?" "Earlier this year," I explained, offering no details about my financial situation. "I've always loved historical architecture." Before he could respond, my mother appeared at his side, having noticed our interaction from their window. Her eyes widened as she registered my identity. "Emma?" Her voice cracked slightly. "Why didn't you tell us you were moving back?" The genuine confusion in her question illustrated how completely they had missed the point of my absence. In their narrative, I had simply gone away to build my life elsewhere, not been pushed out of the one we had shared. "I'm finishing up the renovation," I replied, neither confirming nor denying my intentions to live in the house. It's been an interesting project. Their expressions, a mixture of shock, confusion, and dawning realization, told me that regardless of what happened next, the dynamic between us had irrevocably shifted. The daughter they had deemed expendable had returned, not seeking reconciliation, but having created success entirely on her own terms. As I excused myself to speak with the foreman, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't fully acknowledged was still there. This house wasn't about revenge after all. It was about reclamation of power, of presence, and of the right to define my own story. The moving trucks arrived on a crisp November morning, their presence impossible to miss on the quiet street. I supervised the unloading of my carefully selected furniture, artwork, and the few meaningful possessions I had accumulated over the years. Each item represented a deliberate choice, rather than the haphazard collection most people amass through gifts and impulse purchases. From the corner of my eye, I noticed my parents taking turns peering through their living room window. Their curiosity was palpable, but neither ventured outside during the first few hours of activity. It wasn't until the piano was being carefully maneuvered up the front steps, a recent purchase inspired by my grandmother's love of music, that my father finally emerged from their house and crossed the street. "Emma?" he called, approaching hesitantly. "Is this really happening? You're actually moving in?" I turned from the clipboard, where I'd been checking off delivered items. "Yes, I am. Today's moving day." He looked between me and the impressive facade of the restored Victorian, his expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been shame. "Why didn't you tell us? All these months of renovation, and we had no idea it was you." "Would it have mattered?" I asked simply. The question hung between us, heavy with implications. Before he could answer, my mother appeared at his side, her expression more carefully composed. "Emma," she began, her voice attempting warmth that didn't reach her eyes. "This is quite a surprise. What a lovely home you've made for yourself." The word home struck me with particular force, coming from the woman who had participated in taking mine away. "Thank you," I replied neutrally. "It's been a fulfilling project." "We should have dinner soon," she continued. "Catch up properly. The boys would love to see you. They're in college now, you know. Ryan at UConn and Tyler at Southern Connecticut State." The casual way she dropped into conversation, as if our estrangement had been a minor misunderstanding, rather than years of deliberate distance, was jarring. More telling was her immediate pivot to the twins' achievements, the familiar pattern reasserting itself despite the changed circumstances. "Congratulations to them," I said. "I'm quite busy with the move and my work transfer, but perhaps sometime in the future." My father seemed to be studying the house with new eyes, likely calculating its value and the financial resources required for such an extensive renovation. "You must be doing very well," he observed. "What exactly do you do now?" The fact that he didn't know my profession after nearly a decade spoke volumes. "I'm a senior investment advisor with Morton Financial. I've transferred to the Hartford office." Recognition flickered in his expression. Morton had a reputation even among those outside financial circles. "That's impressive," he said, seeming genuinely surprised. "Your mother and I always knew you were smart, but this is unexpected," I supplied when he trailed off. "I should get back to the movers. They need direction on some fragile items." As I turned to leave, my mother touched my arm lightly. "Emma, there's a neighborhood potluck this Sunday at the Wilsons' house. You should come meet everyone. Or re-meet them, I suppose." The invitation seemed sincere, but I recognized it for what it was: an opportunity to publicly reclaim connection to my success, to be able to say "our daughter" when neighbors inevitably commented on the stunning renovation. "I'll see if my schedule permits," I responded noncommittally. Later that afternoon, as the movers departed and I began unpacking essentials in the kitchen, a text message arrived from an unfamiliar number. "Is it really you across the street? This is Tyler. Mom gave me your number." I stared at the message, surprised by the contact from my younger brother. We had barely spoken since they were children, my parents having effectively created separate family units, them with the twins, and me on my own. "Yes, it's me," I replied after consideration. "How are you, Tyler?" His response came quickly. "Weird seeing your name pop up after all this time. I'm good. Sophomore at SCUS. Business major. Can I stop by sometime? Feels strange texting my sister when I can literally see your house." The message gave me pause. Tyler had been only 6 when I left home, too young to understand what had happened or to have played any role in it. While I had built walls around my heart regarding my parents, I realized I had no real feelings about my brothers beyond a vague sense that they had benefited from my exclusion. "Sure," I texted back. "I'm getting settled this week, but next weekend could work." The Sunday neighborhood potluck arrived before I had fully unpacked. Despite misgivings, I decided to attend, bringing a gourmet cheese and charcuterie board from an upscale Hartford deli. Walking into the Wilsons' home neighbors, I remembered from childhood, felt like stepping into an alternate universe where I was simultaneously insider and outsider. "Emma Mitchell!" Joyce Wilson exclaimed upon opening the door. "We've been dying to meet the person behind that magnificent renovation. When your parents told us it was you, we could hardly believe it." Her words confirmed my suspicion that my parents had already begun spinning a narrative around my return, one that likely minimized our estrangement and maximized their connection to my success. Inside, I navigated a series of similar reactions: old neighbors expressing delight at my homecoming and complimenting the family property I had restored. With each conversation, I politely but firmly corrected misconceptions. "It's not a family project," I explained to Mrs. Henderson when she commented on my parents' obvious pride. "I purchased the property independently as an investment and residence." "But how wonderful that you chose to return to your roots," she persisted. "Your parents must be thrilled to have you across the street." Before I could respond, my mother appeared beside us, slipping her arm through mine as if we had a close relationship. "We're just so proud of everything Emma has accomplished," she gushed. "Always knew she was destined for great things." I gently extricated myself from her grip. "If you'll excuse me, I should say hello to the Petersons." Throughout the evening, I maintained cordial but distant interactions with my parents, who seemed intent on performing familial closeness for the neighborhood audience. My father boasted about my daughter, the financial whiz, to his golf buddies, while my mother repeatedly mentioned to anyone listening that I had always had an eye for design. Gets it from my side of the family. The most genuine moment came when Tyler arrived late, having driven from campus. Unlike our parents, he approached me with straightforward curiosity rather than performative affection. "So you're really my sister," he said, studying me over a paper plate of potluck offerings. "I mean, I know you are, but you've been more like a family legend than an actual person." His candor was refreshing. "What kind of legend?" I asked. "The smart one who got away," he replied with a half smile. "Dad's cautionary tale about ungrateful children. Mom's example of independence taken too far." He shrugged. Ryan bought into it all, but I always wondered about your side of the story. Before I could respond, my father appeared, clapping Tyler on the shoulder. I see you two are getting reacquainted. Tyler's following in your financial footsteps, Emma. Business major with a focus on accounting. Investment finance, Dad? Tyler corrected with an eye roll. I've told you like 50 times. Same difference, my father dismissed. The point is, academic excellence runs in the family. The irony of him claiming familial connection to both our achievements after years of separation wasn't lost on me. How's Ryan enjoying UConn? I asked, changing the subject. Football scholarship keeping him busy, my father replied proudly. Starting lineup this season. You should come to a game sometime. Perhaps, I said noncommittally. Later that week, my parents left a voicemail inviting me to Sunday dinner to properly welcome you home, my mother's voice explained. I listened to the message twice before deciding how to respond. The easy path would be refusal, maintaining the emotional distance I'd cultivated for self-protection. Yet something about Tyler's straightforward approach had made me curious about whether there could be some form of relationship there worth exploring. I texted rather than called. Thank you for the invitation. I can come for coffee after dinner, around 7:30. I have work commitments earlier. My mother's response came quickly. Perfect. I'll make your favorite apple crisp. The fact that she still remembered my favorite dessert after so many years caught me off guard. It was a small detail that didn't fit neatly into my narrative of parental indifference. I tucked the observation away, a reminder that human relationships rarely conform to simple categorizations. Sunday evening found me standing on my childhood home's front steps precisely at 7:30, a bottle of mid-range wine in hand. The door opened before I could knock, revealing my mother's overly bright smile. Emma! Come in, we're so glad you could make it. The interior had changed little since my last visit years ago. The same beige carpet, the same family photos on the walls, though I noticed newer pictures of the twins had replaced most of the ones that had included me. The basement door remained closed, the pull-out sofa inside likely long since repurposed. My father and the twins waited in the living room. Ryan, now a bulkier version of the child I remembered, offered a perfunctory handshake. Tyler gave an awkward half-wave, seemingly more genuine in private than he had been at the neighborhood gathering. Well, my father said after an uncomfortable silence, "Shall we have that coffee?" The next hour passed in stilted conversation dominated by my parents' determined cheerfulness and probing questions about my career and finances, thinly disguised as interest in my life. Ryan contributed occasional comments about his football achievements, while Tyler remained mostly silent, watching our interactions with analytical eyes. We've been thinking, my mother eventually said during a lull, about the future. Your father's nearing retirement age, and this house has become so much to maintain. I felt a familiar tension creep up my spine. Oh? It's just, my father continued, with the boys finishing college soon, and this neighborhood becoming so desirable again, thanks in large part to your beautiful renovation across the street. We wondered if you might consider helping us downsize, my mother finished. Perhaps find a nice condo nearby. Your financial expertise would be so valuable in making sure we're secure for retirement. The request's true nature became clear. They wanted to capitalize on my professional knowledge now that I had proven successful. The unspoken subtext that this could be their entree to a more comfortable retirement than they had planned hung in the air between us. I can recommend a good financial advisor at my firm who specializes in retirement planning, I replied evenly. I'd be happy to make an introduction. The disappointment in their expressions confirmed my interpretation. They hadn't wanted professional guidance available to any client. They had wanted special consideration from a daughter they had discarded when she needed them most. Well, my father said, recovering quickly, that's very professional of you. I should be going, I said, rising from my seat. Early meeting tomorrow. Thank you for coffee. Tyler followed me to the door while our parents remained in the living room. They're not subtle, are they? He observed quietly. No, I agreed. They're not. For what it's worth, he added, I'd like to know you, regardless of their agenda. Maybe we could get lunch sometime? His directness reminded me of Grandmother Martha, a clarity untainted by the manipulation I'd grown to expect from family interactions. I'd like that, I replied, surprised to realize I meant it. As I walked back to my house, I could see my parents through their front window, heads close together in conversation. I felt an unexpected lightness in my chest, not vindication or triumph as I might have imagined, but something closer to release. The people whose approval and love I had desperately craved as a child no longer held that power over me. I had built a life defined by my choices rather than their rejection. The Victorian's porch light welcomed me home, my home, created through my own efforts. As I climbed the steps, I glanced back at the house where I had grown up and felt, for the first time, that I had truly moved on. Mornings quickly became my favorite time in the Victorian. I established a ritual of brewing coffee in the gourmet kitchen before settling into the wicker chair on my wraparound porch, watching the neighborhood wake up while planning my day. The porch faced my parents' house not by accident. I had specifically designed the outdoor living space to maximize that view. But what had started as a symbolic position of power gradually transformed into something unexpected. Rather than satisfaction at my parents' obvious discomfort whenever they spotted me enjoying my morning coffee or evening wine on that porch, I began to feel a strange sense of disconnection. The people across the street, still living in the house where I grew up, had become almost like characters in a story I had outgrown. 6 months after moving in, I had established myself not just as a homeowner, but as an active community member. I joined the Historical Society, volunteered at the library's financial literacy program, and hosted a fundraiser for the local women's shelter in my meticulously restored parlor. Neighbors who had known me as a child now approached me as a respected professional and community asset. Tyler and I maintained our tentative connection, meeting monthly for lunch, where we carefully avoided discussion of our parents while getting to know each other as adults. He was thoughtful and perceptive, with none of the entitlement I had observed during my brief interactions with Ryan. "I've been thinking about my career path," Tyler mentioned during one of our lunches. "The more I learn about finance, the more I'm drawn to impact investing using capital to support social and environmental goals alongside financial returns. Is that something you have experience with?" His genuine interest in my professional insight touched me unexpectedly. "Actually, yes. I've been developing a portfolio segment focused on exactly that for some of my clients. It's a growing field with considerable potential. Would you," he hesitated, "would you be willing to look at my course selection for next semester? Help me focus my studies in that direction?" The request was modest but significant, an acknowledgement of my expertise and a desire for connection based on mutual respect rather than obligation. "I'd be happy to," I replied sincerely. As spring turned to summer, my professional life flourished alongside my personal growth. The Hartford office had given me increased autonomy, and I had begun developing a specialized practice focusing on women rebuilding their financial lives after divorce or widowhood. Many clients commented that my empathetic approach to financial planning made complex topics accessible in ways they hadn't experienced with other advisors. "You don't talk down to us," one client explained after a particularly successful portfolio review. "And you understand that money isn't just about numbers, it's about security, choices, and sometimes healing." Her observation resonated deeply. My financial journey had indeed been about all those things, creating security I had lacked, expanding choices that had once seemed limited, and yes, healing wounds that money alone couldn't address, but financial independence had helped make bearable. My collaboration with Sophia Parker had also continued to evolve. We established a small investment group focused on restoring historical properties in overlooked neighborhoods, combining her development expertise with my financial acumen. Each project created not just profit but beautiful, functional spaces that honored architectural heritage while serving contemporary needs. "You've found your niche," Sophia observed during a site visit to our latest acquisition. "The intersection of finance, restoration, and revival. It suits you. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents remained cordial but distant. They occasionally waved from their yard or stopped for brief exchanges when we crossed paths in the neighborhood. I attended major holiday gatherings at their home, maintaining the minimum family connection that felt manageable. During one such visit, Thanksgiving dinner that had been carefully orchestrated by my mother, I noticed subtle changes in their home. The furniture seemed more worn, the appliances outdated, the general maintenance slipping in ways that suggested financial constraint. The place is looking a little tired, my father acknowledged when he caught me examining a water stain on the ceiling. Fixed income doesn't stretch as far as we'd hoped. Have you consulted with the financial advisor I recommended? I asked. We keep meaning to, my mother interjected quickly. It's just been so busy with the boys finishing school. Their reluctance didn't surprise me. Accepting professional financial advice would mean acknowledging their vulnerable position, something their pride made difficult, particularly given my obvious success. As I was leaving that evening, my mother followed me to the door. Emma, she began hesitantly, your father and I have been thinking about the future. The familiar tension returned. Yes? We're not getting any younger, and this house is becoming too much for us to maintain. We've been looking at retirement communities, but the ones we can afford are so far from the boys. I waited, sensing where this was heading. We wondered if, perhaps, you might consider letting us move in with you. That big house has so many rooms, and we could help with upkeep, cooking. Her voice trailed off as she registered my expression. The request stunned me, not with its audacity, but with its disconnection from reality. After years of minimal contact following their effective abandonment, they now envisioned a multi-generational household, as if our estrangement had been a minor disagreement. I don't think that would work, I replied carefully, but I'm happy to help you explore appropriate retirement options. Her face fell. I see. Well, it was just a thought. That night, sitting in my study overlooking the neighborhood, I reflected on how completely our roles had reversed. The parents who had once declared our rules now looked to me for housing security. The daughter they had deemed unnecessary to accommodate was now the one with rooms to spare. The irony wasn't lost on me, but neither was the realization that continuing the cycle of rejection would not heal old wounds, it would only create new ones. My success wasn't measured by their recognition of what they had lost, but by what I had built despite their absence. The next day, I contacted a colleague who specialized in retirement planning and arranged a complimentary consultation for my parents. I emailed them the details with a brief note. This is someone who can help you make informed decisions about your future. The initial meeting is my treat. It was neither the financial rescue they had hoped for, nor the rejection they feared. It was instead a boundary firm, but not cruel, defining the extent of my involvement in their lives moving forward. As my second year in the Victorian approached, I received unexpected news that shifted my perspective yet again. Tyler called one evening, his voice vibrating with excitement. I got the internship, the one with the Environmental Impact Fund in Boston, the one you helped me prepare for. His achievement filled me with genuine pride. That's fantastic, Tyler. When do you start? June. But there's a problem. Housing in Boston is insane, and the stipend won't cover much. I found myself offering before I had fully considered the implications. You could stay in my Boston apartment if you'd like. I've kept it as an investment property, but the current lease ends in May. The silence on the other end of the line stretched uncomfortably. Tyler? Sorry, I'm just surprised. That's incredibly generous. It's practical, I corrected, uncomfortable with his gratitude. The apartment would otherwise sit empty between tenants, and you'll take good care of it. After we worked out the details, I sat in my parlor contemplating this evolution in our relationship. By helping Tyler, I wasn't erasing the past or enabling the dynamic that had hurt me. Instead, I was creating something new, a relationship based on mutual respect and shared values, rather than obligatory family ties. This realization extended to my perspective on my parents as well. Their failure as parents didn't require my failure as a human being. I could acknowledge the hurt they had caused while still making choices guided by compassion rather than retribution. With this mindset, I made another decision that surprised even me. When I learned through community gossip that my parents were struggling to address critical repairs to their aging roof, I anonymously arranged for a reputable contractor to contact them with a neighborhood discount program that significantly reduced their cost. They would never know the source of this assistance, and I preferred it that way. The help wasn't about recognition or reconciliation, but about breaking cycles of harm. That summer, I expanded my financial literacy program to include a scholarship for young women aging out of the foster system, those who, like me, had to navigate adulthood without family support. Using my own journey as a template, the program provided not just financial assistance but mentoring, housing guidance, and emotional support during the crucial transition to independence. "You've created something remarkable here," Sophia commented during the scholarship launch event hosted in my home. "You've transformed your pain into purpose." Looking around at the gathering community leaders, financial professionals, and the first cohort of scholarship recipients, I felt an unexpected sense of wholeness. The house that had begun as a symbol of success in view of those who had dismissed me had become instead a platform for creating opportunity for others facing similar challenges. Later that evening, after the guests had departed, I stood on my porch looking across at my parents' darkened windows. The need to prove myself to them had faded, replaced by the quieter satisfaction of living according to my own values. Success wasn't about their recognition, but about creating a life aligned with my deepest principles: financial security, yes, but also integrity, generosity, and growth. The Victorian, once purchased partially as a statement, had transformed into a genuine home, a place where I hosted community events, mentored young professionals like Tyler, and continued my own journey of healing. The view of my parents' house remained, but its emotional significance had diminished. It was simply a part of the landscape now, neither a shrine to past hurts nor a symbol of triumph. As I turned to go inside, I realized that the true measure of moving forward wasn't forgetting or forgiving what had happened, but building something so meaningful that it no longer defined me. The room I had been forced to leave had indeed led me to build the home I was meant to have, not just physically, but in every sense that mattered. On a perfect June evening, 3 years after moving into the Victorian, I hosted the neighborhood's annual summer gathering. Lanterns illuminated the wraparound porch, and tables dotted the expansive lawn where neighbors mingled, enjoying catered appetizers and local wine. Children played tag around ancient oak trees, while their parents chatted in groups across the property. The house, now fully restored to its historical glory while incorporating modern comforts, had become a natural gathering place for community events. This particular celebration marked not just the beginning of summer, but the first graduation from my foundation's scholarship program, a milestone that filled me with quiet pride. From the porch, I watched my parents arrive, looking smaller and more hesitant than I remembered from childhood. They had aged visibly in recent years, my father's once commanding presence diminished by health struggles, my mother's carefully maintained appearance showing signs of strain despite her efforts. Tyler greeted them warmly before making his way to my side. At 24, he had grown into a thoughtful young man whose successful internship had translated into a promising position with a sustainable investment firm in Boston. "Mom and Dad are nervous about being here," he observed quietly. "They still don't quite know how to act around you, especially in your territory." "They'll be fine," I replied. "Mrs. Henderson will corner them about the Historical Society fundraiser within minutes, and they'll forget all about me." He laughed. "Probably true. Still, it's good they came. Progress, right?" Before I could respond, Sophia approached with a local developer interested in our latest restoration project. As I fell into comfortable discussion about historical tax credits and zoning variances, I noticed my father watching our conversation from across the lawn, his expression unreadable. Later, as twilight softened the edges of the gathering, he approached me as I refreshed the dessert table. "Impressive event," he said, gesturing to the seamlessly orchestrated party. "You've really made something of this place." "Thank you," I replied, arranging a platter of mini pastries. "Emma," he continued, his voice lower, more hesitant. "Could we talk somewhere? Just for a moment." Curious, I led him to the small garden alcove at the side of the house, partially screened from the party by a trellis of climbing roses. The private space had become my favorite reading spot on summer evenings. "I've been wanting to say something for a while now," he began, looking older than his 65 years in the fading light. "About what happened. When you were 18, I remained silent, giving him space to continue. "I was wrong," he said simply. "The way we handled things, the ultimatum, making you leave, it was wrong. I've known it for years but didn't know how to say it." The acknowledgement, coming so many years after the fact, landed strangely. It was both what I had once desperately wanted to hear and something that no longer held the power I had imagined it would. "Why now?" I asked. He gestured vaguely toward the party, the house, the life I had built. "Because I see what you've made of yourself, and I know we had no part in it. Because Tyler talks about you with admiration I once hoped he'd have for me. Because I'm getting older and thinking about legacy." He paused. "Mostly because it's true, and I should have said it long ago." I studied his face, noting the regret that seemed genuine despite its belated appearance. "I appreciate you saying that." We stood in silence for a moment, the party's gentle hum surrounding us. "I don't expect forgiveness," he added finally, "or for things to suddenly be different. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I couldn't or wouldn't see then." As we rejoined the gathering, I felt neither the vindication nor the emotional catharsis movies might have portrayed in such a moment. Instead, I experienced something quieter, a closing of a chapter, an acknowledgement that allowed me to move forward with even greater clarity. My mother cornered me later by the beverage station, her approach more indirect, but similarly conciliatory. "You've done so well, Emma. We didn't give you enough credit." "No," I agreed. "You didn't." She flinched slightly at my directness, but continued. "The scholarship program you've started, it's wonderful. Helping those girls who don't have family support." The irony of her praise wasn't lost on either of us. "Everyone deserves a chance to build security," I said, "especially those who have to do it alone." As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Tyler approached with news that Ryan had finally secured a teaching position after struggling to find direction following graduation. "He's coaching football at our old high school," Tyler explained. "Not what Dad envisioned for him, but he seems happy for the first time in years." "Good for him," I said sincerely. Despite our distant relationship, I harbored no ill will toward Ryan, who had been as much a product of our parents' dysfunctional approach as I had been, albeit in different ways. The following morning, I sat in my customary spot on the porch, coffee in hand, watching my parents' house across the street. Their curtains twitched, a familiar sight that now evoked more complex emotions than the satisfaction I had once anticipated. My phone buzzed with a message from Sophia confirming our meeting with potential investors for our next project, an abandoned mill complex we plan to transform into affordable housing with integrated financial education services. The work had become increasingly meaningful as we aligned our business model more directly with community needs. Looking between the message and my parents' house, I realized how completely my definition of success had evolved. The house that had once represented validation in the eyes of those who had rejected me had become instead a platform for creating something larger than myself, a foundation supporting young women facing the challenges I had overcome, restoration projects, revitalizing neglected spaces, and community initiatives fostering connection. My parents would never fully understand the impact of their actions, just as they would never fully appreciate the person I had become, in spite of, rather than because of their parenting. But that understanding was no longer necessary for my own peace. Later that week, as I finalized plans to expand the scholarship program to neighboring counties, I received an unexpected email from my mother. Attached was a scanned photograph I had never seen myself at about 5 years old, sitting on my grandmother Martha's lap at the piano, both of us laughing at something beyond the camera's view. The message read simply, "Found this while cleaning. Thought you should have it. You look so much like her now." The observation struck me as perhaps the first genuine insight my mother had shared in our entire adult relationship. I did indeed share my grandmother's features, but more importantly, I had inherited her belief in creating opportunity from challenge and her understanding that family is defined by actions rather than mere biology. That evening, I added the photograph to the growing gallery wall in my study, a visual representation of the chosen family and meaningful connections I had built. Alongside pictures with Sophia, Tyler, scholarship recipients, and close friends stood this single image linking me to my past, while affirming how far I had come. As summer turned to fall, I made a decision that surprised many, but felt entirely right to me. After carefully researching options, I purchased a modest but well-maintained condo in a seniors community 20 minutes from my home. I arranged for the property to be held in a trust with specific terms. My parents could live there rent-free as long as they needed, with maintenance and association fees covered. When my attorney presented them with the arrangement, their reaction was predictably complicated, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and injured pride. They accepted with a gracelessness that might once have hurt, but now only confirmed the wisdom of maintaining clear boundaries. The trust structure ensured they received necessary housing security without the entanglement of direct financial dependence on me. Their move from the house across the street created an unexpected sense of closure. The property sold quickly to a young family with children who brought new energy to the neighborhood. Watching them play in the yard where I had once felt so invisible felt like the completion of a circle, the space transformed just as I had been. My own future expanded with possibilities I created rather than inherited. The foundation's work continued to grow. My partnership with Sophia evolved into new territories of community-focused development, and my personal investment in mentoring young women like myself became increasingly central to my sense of purpose. On quiet evenings, I still sometimes sat on my porch, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here, from a discarded daughter sleeping in her car to a woman who had built not just financial security but meaningful impact. The view had changed, both literally and figuratively. I no longer looked across at my parents' house, seeking validation or harboring resentment, but instead gazed outward at a community and future shaped by my own vision. The true victory, I realized, wasn't in owning the house across from theirs. It was in creating a life so authentic and purpose-driven that their approval or understanding had become entirely secondary to the value I created in the world. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after family rejection, or found that success wasn't what healed you, but rather the purpose you discovered along the way? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more about family dynamics, financial independence, and finding home in unexpected places. Thank you for joining me on this path of turning pain into purpose. Sometimes the most beautiful renovations are the ones we do in our own lives. Until next time, remember that your story isn't defined by who left you behind, but by what you build in your future.